Welcome back to Law Call. During the break, we got a call from Marianne, I believe from Mariana. Marianne, go ahead with your question.
Hi, my mom was a driver in a pedestrian versus automobile, and the injured party is seeking to explore her assets, and there's a substantial amount of money in the bank because she lost her home in the tornadoes in January, and I'm just wondering if those assets are protected because they're considered her home.
Okay, Marion, that's a good question. A lot of that, there's a lot of details that could potentially play in that one way or another. But the long story short is anytime you have an accident like this, you have insurance that potentially protects you, but your liability is not limited to the amount of insurance. So very frequently there's an exploration and research done to whether or not there's the ability to make a personal contribution over and above that insurance policy. Florida law has certain protections that potentially come into play with respect to homestead protection, with respect to garnishments that may or may not be available if you're what's considered head of household, primary vehicles, things of that nature. With respect to funds continuing to maintain any type of protection with respect to homestead, there's a lot of factors that go into play on whether or not those have been commingled or not and whether they've been kept separately. There is the potential, depending on, for example, if you've sold your homestead and you keep those funds separately, there's some strong arguments if you are intending to buy a new homestead. With respect to whether or not insurance proceeds would be protected, I would recommend seeking the advice of a bankruptcy attorney or a creditor's right attorney to get a clearer answer on that. But that's something that you need to explore and you need to go over and discuss that also with the insurance company. They should have an attorney your own insurance company should retain an attorney to help you discuss that and to go over that and make sure you utilize all of those resources, because that's something that people take for granted and don't understand necessarily. Is there's a lot of benefit. There's a lot of benefits under an insurance policy, but there's two main ones that come into play when you have an accident that hurts someone. One, they will pay to resolve the claim up to the limits of the policy coverage that you have purchased, but in addition, they will pay for an attorney to defend you. And many times, Marcus, that can be even more valuable, right? I mean, especially if you have a lower limit policy, let's say $25,000 or $50,000, and if you have to get into a lawsuit, it's very easy for legal fees to exceed that. So, you know, that's something you want to make sure and explore and utilize that benefit that you paid for with that premium. Mm-hmm. But very, very unfortunate situation. So you want to make sure and utilize anything you have at your disposal to make sure that you make the best decision for your family. Marcus, you know, in that pedestrian situation, you know, a lot of times people miss the fact that from that pedestrian's point of view, that his and his family's auto insurance can potentially be implicated. What are some of the factors that we look for in those situations?
Factors we look at, does he have uninsured motorists that could step in, or does the family member that he lives with have uninsured motorists? Because a lot of times those policies will cover you. So absolutely, just because you're not in your automobile doesn't mean that your auto insurance isn't in play. So yeah, those are some of the factors that we look at in that kind of situation.
That's very important, and you know, and also your PIP no-fault benefits are going to come into play. And if you have an unfortunate situation like this where someone maybe has even passed away, you have a $5,000 PIP death benefit that will pay in addition to any end-of-life medical expenses that are needed. And so that helps with some of those funeral type things and other costs of that nature. But the big one that can potentially be triggered is, like Marcus said, that uninsured motorist coverage, both on that individual's policy as well as any insurance that goes with any resident relatives that they live with. So it's always important to look at as many possible avenues. It doesn't mean you always have the ability to, but you need to know, because the biggest thing when you have something, especially a very tragic loss like this to happen, is you need to know what your options are. and you got to make an educated decision based off of all of that information. And it's tough. You know, you have all this flying at you, and you don't know what to do.
Yeah, and it's an emotional time, and that's why it's important to get a professional involved.
Right, and you want to make sure and not just look at one thing. You got to look at everything. Is there any potential that there was someone on the job? Was there any potential that there's any other type of coverage in play? One thing that Florida does, you know, we're showing this both in Florida and Alabama, and I'm licensed in both Florida and Alabama. And unlike Alabama, in Florida, if your name is on the title of that vehicle, you're just as liable as the driver, with some minor caveats there. But I mean, how does that work in Florida versus Alabama?
Well, I'm not licensed in
I
Alabama,
can get to
so
the
I can't give you the
Alabama part.
contrast.
Right.
But yeah, in Florida, it's a dangerous instrumentality that you put out there, and it's got your name on it. So whoever you've let drive it. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. If somebody steals your car, I don't have
Right.
to
It has to be with permission. But that's a big thing. For example, my name is on my car. My wife's name is on my car. I don't let my name go on her car, just in case. It's always better to be safe than sorry. And you know, while you know, with your kids, you're gonna have to have an adult's name on there. A kid can't own property until they're 18 and legally can contract. But I can guarantee you, as soon as my kids turn 18, I'm going to be signing that title over to them and taking my wife's name off of it and putting it in their names, because it's just better to be safe than sorry. Now, obviously, you still need to get adequate insurance to protect, but you always want to be. A vehicle is what I call a rolling liability, not an asset, because there's a lot of dangers, especially in a community like this or anywhere in the state of Florida. There's a lot of tourists coming down, and we have a lot of road construction. I got detoured around 390 on the way in here tonight. You know, there's a lot of things going on, and things change from one day to the other. Traffic patterns are changing, so it's always, you know, look out, be careful. There's no reason to be in a hurry anywhere you're going. But those are if your name's on the vehicle, that's a very, very big potential liability. Conversely, in Alabama, it's a negligent entrustment type analysis. So there has to have been some sort of negligence in giving the person permission. So, for example, if you know the individual has been in 17 wrecks and has a suspended license, and you give them your car keys, that's very likely going to meet the definition of negligent entrustment. If you hand the keys to an intoxicated person, that absolutely is going to be negligent entrustment. So differing standards depending on where you are.